Oh, there's Mr. John Richards.
Discussion.
John, you came in
Yeah.
just in the nick of time. I was about to grab me a smoke. You want to talk to Adam for a little bit? I'll be right back.
Okay.
Here you go. Let me put you on the big screen. There you go. Adam's a good guy, and thank you for coming in the room. I have looked at some of the stuff you got. Good stuff. Good stuff. Be right back.
Thank you. Hi, Adam. How the devil are you?
Hey, John. It's going all right. Nice to meet you.
Good. Great. So I've never met Brett.
Oh,
I've just heard about him from a guest on my show yesterday. So this is a completely cold appearance on my behalf. And I've not been aware of GodTvRadio show before either. So what goes on?
I'm so sorry, John. My internet cut out for just a couple of seconds. I missed the last sentence of what you said.
So I said I've never heard of this show before.
Uh-huh.
So tell me about it. What goes on? What happens here?
Sure, yeah. So we actually have been going for quite a while, but so this is Brett's God TV Radio live stream. It's usually just an open discussion. A lot of times it focuses on, theism and atheism, but it can get into all kinds of stuff, consciousness and evolution and science. A lot of time we talk about the Big Bang Theory or just it could get into anything really, but it oftentimes just comes back to those fundamental core philosophical questions and religious questions.
Yeah. Rabbit holes that always regress right back to the start of everything.
Oh, sure, yeah. Something like that. So what Brett usually when someone comes on, a lot of times he'll ask them, what's your religious views? What are your political views? That sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm in the UK and I took care to be produced by non-religious parents, which is easily done in the UK, less so in the US of A. And so I never got inducted into a religion. I went to the only sort of school that was available, which in those days was the Church of England school. So I met the Christian religion there. And to this day, the law is widely disregarded. But the law still says that every school should start every day with a worship ceremony, a communal worship ceremony, the whole school in one room, one hall. And unless the school is designated Jewish or some other faith, it should be of a Christian nature. Now, as I said, that's widely disregarded in this country. But back then, it wasn't. Because look at me, I'm old. So back when I was at school, we did have a Christian morning assembly. And later on in my schooling, we had religious studies. In those days, it was called RI, religious instruction. So you can see the importance and the weight and the lack of acceptance of challenge or critical thought that went behind it by the word instruction.
Right.
We're giving you this and you're going to put up with it. Sorry, my phone's going off. It's
you're good.
I put it on mute because, of course, I didn't know I was going to come on a show until a couple of minutes ago.
Sure, yeah.
So where was I? So I didn't meet. My family were not religious. We didn't go to church, not even at Christmas or Easter. The only times we went to church were for funerals, and as a small boy, I got left behind, and weddings. So I went to a few wedding ceremonies, but that was it from the family point of view. I had uncles and aunts, lots of. None of them were interested. Oh, stop it. So I'm sorry about these bongings going on, Adam. Technology.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
So my upbringing, apart from school, where it was the staff that had to do the job because the law said so, but nobody else in my peer group was in the slightest bit interested.
Interesting. Wow.
But that was normal for the UK. And so although I met religion at school, Christianity,
yeah,
I didn't get convinced by it.
Interesting.
So I'm coming from the point of view of born an atheist, and I've stayed like that.
Sure, yeah.
And
well, that's a different experience from what I've had. I was raised Christian, in a Baptist American church, and over time I kind of came to start. Although I did have some religious experiences and stuff, I started questioning the Bible and eventually arrived at a position of atheism through critical thinking and that sort of thing, which I think is sort of, in a way, it kind of I don't know, because since I haven't had your experience where I just started out with what I am convinced of now, it's hard to say like which would be better. Like, in a way, I feel like I kind of sharpened my critical thinking skills by having to start out as a Christian and get out of it, reason my way out of it, and figure it out that it was wrong. Versus, it's probably pretty odd. Some of the things that might have been hard for me to figure out might have been really easy and obvious for you. Like, well, obviously that's sort of a talking snake or something that's kind of silly. But like when you believe it as a little kid and everyone around you believes it, and that's like everyone you talk to, you know what I mean? Like it didn't seem that irrational of a belief if I was so surrounded by it, that if most people I knew believed it, it didn't seem that irrational. But yeah,
that's the common experience in America.
Yeah.
What we did about 400 years ago was we sent all our fundamentalists over to you.
That's rough.
So are you you're behind the scenes at the moment then, Brett, are you? Because I've seen you putting up messages. And who's Rage?
Oh, Raging Atheist. He's a guy that was in here earlier. He has a tendency he has a lot of, I know this might come off unusual, but he has a lot of animosity about the figure in the Bible that is referred to as God.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you my little hypothesis about that, because since I was never in a religion, I don't have a rage. My theory, use that small t theory, not scientific theory. My guess is that the people who rage have a grievance because they were inducted as children and had to sort of scrabble their way out of this hole that they were put into. So consequently, they're cross with their life so far because they feel that they were deceived, and naturally they're militant. They're aggressive atheists now. I don't know whether that applies to Rage, of course. I've got no idea what he's like, but that's my idea of why some atheists are quite obnoxious. I hope I'm not one of those.
Nah, you seem pretty cool. He's cool too. He just has its moments. Sometimes he's just real chill. He's just screaming on top of his lungs, but we love him.
Well, I think he was also in a bad mood because he had come in from another discussion or something, right? He was like already kind of frustrated about that. But yeah, I did go through, when I first became an atheist, I had about a year, I would say probably, maybe longer, where I was pissed off. I was mad about it. And I was like, I felt like I was deceived. Like, I felt like this is messed up. Like, how could people kind of trick me into believing this? Like, since I was a little kid, I was like pissed off about it. And I wanted to like go confront Christians about their beliefs. And I saw it as this negative thing for a while. Yeah. But I see religion mostly as a positive thing for the most part. But I don't know. I don't want to be a hateful militant. I just don't want to be that guy. Even if I felt that way, I don't want to be acting that way anyways. So
no. There's no way to convince people, is it?
That's true too. Yeah, you're not going to win arguments that way. But
why do you think that for, Adam? Whenever I was a hardcore atheist, as people called me, people would come to my Facebook and my social media and say, "Hey, your video really the questions and the topics that you put out, it changed my views. And also it's vice versa now that I actually believe. So I believe that if a discussion's good, it can open people's mind either way.
I don't remember though, Brett, when you were an atheist, were you pissed off and yelling all the time and just going off on people?
There were a couple times I had some anger in me and some animosity. I admit that, but there was some moments where people referred to me as the God Killer. What a weird name, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. Some people said I got through to them.
As you said, Adam, discussion is fine, but there's also vituperation, isn't there? And that's not persuasive.
Sure, yeah. Before when I was a believer, I remember when I saw atheists, the way a lot of them are so angry and hateful and argumentative. I was like, I don't want to be an atheist because it's just, I saw it as a mostly negative thing. Like I don't want to be that kind of person. So I don't know. I think that I don't know if people take that into consideration of maybe you're dissuading people from your belief by being like that. I don't know.
Well, it's certainly not attractive. That's for sure. You're both on mute. What's happening?
John, I'm usually more talkative. I don't know if you see how long we've been doing it. I've been going on for almost 10 hours now. I know you're going to say you must be out of your mind, Brett. Yeah, 10 hours we've been doing this. So my brain's oatmeal. Adam, he's like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going and going. He's ready to rock at all times. Am I right, Adam?
Well, currently I am. But there's been a lot of people in and out. So it's been a lot of different people discussing throughout the past. It's been almost 11 hours, Brett.
What is the reason for this marathon? I can see you've done 10, 58, 12, 13, 14. What are you raising money for something or why?
It's just been an interesting discussion.
Yeah, no money being made whatsoever. Yeah, we just kind of treat these streams like they're a chat. Just let anybody and everybody come in, and I would say 80% of the time it's pretty good. Of course, you get your people who want to come in and show their ding dong off. We got to be careful for that.
Well, I have done a couple of marathons, but always to raise something or other, either funds for a worthy organization or traffic attention for a channel which I was working for at the time. But I prefer to keep my shows limited by time because we all get, what will be a good word? We all get tired and less good TV as the hours go by.
I hear you there. As far as there was one guy in here earlier, a non-believer called Wild Heart, where he asked if I would promote his GoFundMe, and I did. I put it out there. I don't know if anybody actually assisted, but I did promote it for him.
Yeah. Anyway, let's have a look in the comments. What's happening here? Just a nobody, all-seeing eye, just a nobody. Yeah, 11:58. You have to have good stamina to do a 20-hour stream. Exactly. Yes. Well, as I said, I don't do those, except on, the odd occasions when I think there's an organization that would benefit from some fundraising. So I did one earlier this year for Recovering from Religion organization. You know them?
I think I've heard of it.
Brett, didn't you call the Recovering from Religion?
Man, I've called so many different organizations and all that. I can't recall. The last one I called was Godless Engineer and the Atheist Experience.
Yeah. So tell us about the Recovering from Religion organization.
Well, Dr. Darrell Ray, a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, but an actual, doctor, started this organization because he recognized, I think he started it in about 2003. Check it out. This is off my top of my head and my memory is actually in here. So don't rely on anything I say. But check it out because he recognized through his practice as a psychiatrist that there were people who had something very akin to PTSD as a result of their religious upbringing. So he recognized that they needed help. So he set up the organization. It's a counseling service. It's free. It's spread to pretty much all over the world now. And if you're having difficulties getting your mind straight as you transition from your faith, mostly Christianity, to reality, then you can ring him up and get matched with a counselor who will help you to overcome that sort of condition, because it is, a recognized medical condition.
So people who are religious, who are going over to non-believer, they're suffering from PTSD, I believe you said?
That's right. Just like soldiers coming back from Afghanistan.
Well,
maybe not to
what
such
is
an
he?
extent.
Is it some kind of trauma done by priests or preachers or something, or is it just the view of God has affected them traumatically?
It is the trauma, because just think about it. The first thing that religious people have to do to their children in order to induct them into the faith so that they become members of that community, whatever it is, Baptist, Mormon, you name it, the first thing they have to do is destroy their children's self-esteem so that they are in fear of everybody who is superior to them, particularly him up there. And then, once they've done that, they can control them from then on. And that's why some religious sects have this born again movement. If you see what Bishop, he's dead now, sadly, but Bishop Shelby Spong, I don't know whether you've heard of him, but he was a Baptist bishop who, there's some videos, he's well worth watching, because he says that people don't realize that religions are in the control business. And that's why they have a born again movement, because you can't control adults. You can only easily control children. So being born again puts you back in your childhood, vulnerable to control once more.
I have a question for you. This is just something that I think maybe you might have some experience with because you're involved in this. It's something I've wondered about. Why do you suppose it is that, like, for example, okay, so me and my siblings all grew up in a Christian household. Like, we went to church every Sunday and stuff. But some of us believed in it and some of us didn't. And I always find that really fascinating. And then once my siblings had kids, I've noticed that with their children, some of them believe very strongly in God and some of them just automatically don't at all. And it's almost like a personality thing or something where it's like really like they're exposed to essentially the same exact environment, but they come to vastly different conclusions. I find that interesting.
Yeah, I do too. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but obviously what I am is a retired science teacher, mostly biology. So I do know that populations exhibit variation, and so do our children. No two of our children are the same, not even identical twins. So in that range, and it's a variation in all characteristics. So
sure, yeah.
It's a variation in mentality too. And some people will be more accepting of what they're told. Other people will not. They will be more.
Well, shit, let's get into biology then. Are you pretty knowledgeable about biology?
That's not for me to say.
Well, it's refreshing to hear that we actually have a guy who is a scientist in the room. We get a lot of Google layman's that come in, and we just don't feel like we get some of the answers we're looking for sometimes. Am I right, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, it's been one of the most common things we've been discussing lately. And a lot, like with evolution, a lot of people that come in, I'm just starting to get pretty interested in evolution. I hadn't really been very much prior, but a lot of people just have sort of a pretty superficial understanding of just the basic early Darwinian genetic mutation with natural selection as sort of the only thing they really kind of know about evolution, as sort of just an explanation of everything.
Yeah. Okay. So you want a nutshell explanation of evolution, do you? Well,
No, we have an idea of what it's talking about. There's just some things about it that we have questions about and like to discuss. Would you like a couple examples?
okay. Yeah.
Brett calls it snot on a rock. Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't going to do the snot on a rock. I only do that for the people who are being hateful.
I love that, though. I think it's hilarious. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
This guy's totally respectful. I ain't going to act like that.
Incidentally, since you said that, I was looking up slang expressions for moustaches the other day, and one of them, which I rather liked, is snot mop.
Oh, there you go.
That is pretty good. That's good stuff right there. All right, this is a question that I just started asking that's got me curious. I made a video about this. We all have observed deformities in humans as well as animals. If we found the remains of a deformed person or animal, how would we go about separating it from an alleged transitional fossil, especially if the age is very old on it? Hey, Olivia, how you doing there, sweetheart?
Hi, Olivia.
Well, it's very difficult. I can tell you a similar story. For a long time, one of the fossils, a very famous fossil, was named Brontosaurus. And subsequently, people looked at it and thought, because they'd only ever seen the baby ones, the young versions. Or I might be getting this the wrong way around, but there was another fossil called Diplodocus. And don't forget, naming is a human fabrication. We give names to anything in order to make it easier for us to communicate and discuss things and study.
It'd be
things.
nice if they came up with easier names. What was it? Diplopus? What was that?
Diplodocus. Well, yeah, do you want to go into taxonomy now or nomenclature?
No. I was just trying to learn how to pronounce that fancy name. Go ahead, though.
Yeah, because there's a rabbit hole I could go down with you if you like. But for a long time, it was, if you look at the history of the name of this particular fossil, it goes Brontosaurus, Diplodocus, and then, oh, maybe it is a separate species. They are separate species after all, because it's difficult to tell. When you've got bones and other ossified, no, not ossified is not the right word. It's, I can't remember the word for rockified at the moment. It'll come to me. Mineralized, other ways of fossilizing. It's very difficult to tell what things are in isolation. So if you have, unless there's some sort of damage that you can see, like skeletal damage, for example, it's very difficult to tell that this was a deformed one of those. And then you've got to remember that evolution doesn't work on individuals. It works on populations. So even if you have got an example of a deformed one of those, that may be an evolutionary dead end.
Well, fair enough. What do you think, Adam?
Okay, I think that actually, so the example that you gave of Brontosaurus and Diplodocus and Apatosaurus, whichever ones they were, is the exact thing that I referred to too when we were having this discussion a while back with some other people, because it's like that was one of the examples that I knew of, that they mistake some of the juveniles for a different species. But I think an example I would give, I don't know what the politically correct term for it is, used to say midget or dwarf, maybe short person. But, you know, if you did have bone remains of a short person, and like say a Martian came to the planet Earth 2 million years later, and they had fossil evidence of short people, of humans with dwarfism, and sort of ordinary height people, it's not such that it's an evolutionary dead end. It's just one thing that occasionally humans will give birth to someone with that condition, right? So, in other words, if we look back for over the course of the past 100,000 years or something, you'll find examples of humans with dwarfism in the fossil record if it was fossilized, or however the bones were left over. So, anyways, I think that can kind of put the same question in a different frame, where it's like, if Martians did come, how would they know that someone with dwarfism? How would they know whether the humans with dwarfism were a species of short humans versus just a condition that humans occasionally have?
Well, they wouldn't, except that
Exactly.
in the case of dwarfism as a condition, anybody who's an expert will be able to tell from the bone structure, because the proportions of the bones are different. It's the limbs that are disproportionately shorter than the torso compared to the more common, the more normal relationship of sizes. But of course, there are pygmies, small people that are about the size of our children, but perfectly proportioned. But they're not classified as a distinct species. Another thing that you need to know is that, as I was saying, we give names to creatures to make it easy for us to talk about them and to study them. We also give classes to creatures to make it easy for us to study them and understand them. So a species is a box that we like to put over things and say, you're separate and you're different. And nature doesn't like that. Nature doesn't have boxes. They're just for our convenience. So if you think of nature as a blurred continuum, then you've got a better representation in your head. And the dwarfs and the giants are extremes of a range of variation. I'm drawing a graph with my hands. It's not good for radio. It's good for your TV viewers.
What was your YouTube channel again? I think Brett mentioned it before.
Yeah, it's Free Thought Productions. Please, everyone, subscribe.
Well, I'm convinced that from what you've said so far, I definitely want to check out your channel. So
thank you. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about, do you know much about dinosaur evolution?
Not a lot, no, but I have interviewed some experts on that. And if you look back, one particular expert, she's called Dr. Susie Maidment. She is in the dinosaur department of the Natural History Museum in London, which of course was set up back in Victorian times, in pretty much in Darwin's era.
Oh, wow.
And she is an expert. And if you scroll through my archive, you'll see my 3 Thought Hour interview with her.
Okay, cool.
She's an interesting person because she tells how she was asked, I think by an uncle, maybe by a grandfather, when she was aged 8, what she wanted to be when she grew up. And she said, she had this toy dinosaur. And she said, dinosaurs! And it came true. She's now a dinosaur expert and a PhD and continuing to research. Yeah. Few people have that sort of determination from that early age.
So can I ask you, you're a biologist, right? Like what is like the distinction between, is the distinction between zoologists and biologists just that biology encompasses bacteria and other things like that? Or is it more focused on, like, are you more focused on certain aspects of animals that or creatures that a zoologist isn't, or zoologist?
Okay. Well, I'm a retired, mostly biology teacher. I did some other sciences. I did chemistry too, up to entry to university level, a long time ago. And I dabbled in geology and physics as well, and ecology too, because when you're in the science department, you get asked to do a variety of things. But I'm not an expert. I'm a teacher. My level is explaining things to particularly younger people who are learning. That's my mission. So if you want an expert, you've got to go somewhere else, which is what I do. Excuse me, I try to interview academics in my show and non-academic. I'll talk to anybody. But to explain the difference between these specialisms, biology means the study of all of life. Okay, that's from some things which are dubiously alive, such as viruses, right through all of the different examples of the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the bacterial kingdom, right up through to mammals and ourselves. Zoology doesn't include plants. Okay, that's botany that specializes in plants. And you can subdivide that. You can be a specialist in fungi, you can be a specialist in algae, algology. But what's happened more recently is, instead of breaking things down into little tiny categories, we've started to realize that it's all one web. All of life depends on pretty much all the rest of life. So there's been more of a movement lately to bring everything back together under the one banner, the one umbrella, if you like, of biology. And by the way, while I'm on this, there's no such thing as an evolutionist. People like to call biologists who speak about evolution, they like to label them evolutionists, just to make it sound as though, it's still subject to dispute and you can support or argue against it. Nonsense. No professional biology expert, no biology professional calls themselves an evolutionist.
So when you say that there's nothing to or it's not a matter of dispute, do you mean just small gradual changes, or like, what do you mean by that specifically? Because I think that I see a lot to dispute in what I read about the current teachings of how which animals came from which ones and how they're related, and the Cambrian explosion and stuff like that. Like, it seems like a lot to dispute. But there's like speciation, for example, is something that is observed in the laboratory, right? So that's not to be disputed. But extrapolating that to where somehow you get all these different genuses and phyla and stuff like that, I think might be a little more open to at least questioning the validity of.
Well, the principle of evolution is very simple. It's change happens. Okay? Right. And we don't focus exclusively on fossils. That's what creationists want to do, because that is the area where the understanding is least absolute. There's plenty of other evidence that evolution happens. As you say, it's been observed in the lab. It's also been observed in nature. Well, speciation, okay? What do I mean by speciation? I mean a population, descendants, settling down separately from their ancestors and no longer interbreeding with them. Doesn't mean they can't, just means that they don't take the opportunity to. Okay, that's a new species now.
Interesting. I didn't realize that it was just sort of what the distinction you just made. That doesn't mean that they can't interbreed. They just aren't really going out of their way to do it. I didn't realize that was the case.
Exactly. Well, quite a lot of the animals that we label separate species can interbreed. I mean, did you know, for example, that there are tigons, crosses between...
Of course. I mean, there's hybrids between species, between genus, all the way up to what's above a genus is a...
Well, you've got family, you've got order, you've got...
Yeah, so...
class, you've got...
At least on like the Wikipedia page, I think it says that it will go all the way up to order. Wait, well, yeah, order. Like some sea urchin or something will mate with some other order or something like that. It's really rare, obviously, but it can go up that high.
Yeah.
Hey, guys,
often,
I'm gonna grab me some breakfast real quick. You guys look like you're doing great. Take over the show for a little bit. And folks, I put his link out there. Make sure you sub to him. Olivia, if you want to put your link out, as well as Adam, to remind people where to go, do that. I'm gonna grab some breakfast. Be right back. You guys are doing great. I'll be listening.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Enjoy your breakfast. So where was I? I've completely lost track now. Species, evolution, change. Oh yeah, fossils.
Oh yeah, right. What we have observed, like I was asking, what is, because you said that we're pretty sure that evolution, we don't need to call it evolutionist because we have pretty good certainty on this, or I don't know if you use the word certainty, but which parts are so confident and which parts are maybe a little more, if there are any aspects of the theory that you think we can call into question?
Okay, well, we're confident that it happens. And
that speciation happens.
That change happens. And,
okay.
and can result in speciation. Yeah, we've observed it. Yes.
Okay. And I think most people agree with that. Even like these hardcore creationists and stuff still usually agree with a little bit of microevolution, a little bit of variation, different beak sizes and shapes and stuff like that.
Right. Now, you've used the word microevolution, which implies that you think there's two types of evolution, little bits and big bits, macro and micro. What reason is there to think that?
Well, for what reason is there in general or for me specifically? I use micro, I use that term because I've seen it used in papers and textbooks and stuff. I've seen, I think that the difference between something that's like a lot of this is pretty new to me. So I'm actually becoming very fascinated by the topic, but some of this is pretty new, but like a change in just the your DNA, these random mutations versus something where like Hox genes change the entire body plan, like kind of all at once or something. That to me seems like a pretty significant difference.
Okay, so what you're doing there is you're deciding that for your purposes, you want to define big changes as different in some way from small changes. And I'm going to ask you, what stops small changes accumulating to make a big change?
The limit of not having quadrillions of years for new phyla to exist. Like the amount of time you would need for a new phylum, like the difference to go from a new species to a new genus to a new family to a new this to a new that would take a really, really, really long time.
Not always. We now know that there is something called punctuated evolution, which means that there are periods when pretty much nothing happens, and then there are shorter periods when a lot happens. And this is because evolution is a response to environmental change. And the planet has gone through millions of years of stasis and then occasional mega interruptions when an asteroid...
So Darwin was wrong then?
No.
Darwin was a gradualist, right? You're saying punctuated equilibrium is what we now know, but Darwin taught gradualism. Stasis shouldn't be possible in Darwin's version.
No. You're polarizing. Don't polarize.
Okay.
Everything is nuanced, okay? Darwin was right for most of the time. Gradualism applies for millions of years of pretty much nothing happening on planet Earth, it all staying relatively the same.
That's not what Darwin said, though.
What he didn't.
Darwin didn't say stasis. He said gradualism.
No. Right? He didn't know that there was any difference in the environment. He didn't know that there are periods when an asteroid strikes, all the volcanoes go off at once, and the bloody climate is seriously changed, and every organism has to respond to that. He didn't know that.
He didn't know about volcanoes and asteroids?
Well, he didn't know. He didn't know that that sort of activity could be so influential.
Okay.
He knew that there were volcanoes. He'd seen Sicily, and he'd heard of volcanic eruptions. But what happened when this asteroid struck was they pretty much all went off at once, and they wrecked the atmosphere. And it took a few millions of years for it to change back to being normal. During that time, the organisms that survived had to adapt enormously. But let's get back to micro and macro. There is no feasible mechanism that can prevent small changes accumulating into big change. How would it be done? Who's counting? Who's saying, oh, we've had 5 small changes in the recent past, we can't have any more? And what are they doing to prevent?
Well, what I already said was the amount of time allotted. I mean, some scientists, or at least who don't believe in just a Darwinian or neo-Darwinian synthesis, who take it to a further step, they believe that you need further explanation, right? You need things like evo-devo, you need extended synthesis, you need a better explanation of how did this information originate, because the amount of time allotted just isn't enough. And yeah, you allude to punctuated equilibrium, but that isn't, if I understand what you're saying correctly, that isn't that we discovered that it happens really fast. We concluded that when we look at the fossil record and it looks discontinuous like this, and they didn't find all the stuff in between, then yeah, you have to admit that it is punctuated equilibrium is probably what's actually happening.
I've got to explain how we interpret the fossil record. First of all, let's accept that change happens.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely agree on that.
Good. Now we have to look at the verb happens, because we can observe things happening in the lab, new species becoming separate from their ancestors, forming a different population. We can observe that in nature too, but we can't observe it historically, can we? Happens is now. What we have to do is change the verb to happened. Okay, and we weren't there. We can't see what went on.
Right, but I mean the fossil record, though. When I say
I'm just coming to that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
However, what we do have in the fossil record is an obvious progression from a chronological progression, because we can date the rocks, and we can do that. We can do that radiometrically. You know, it doesn't depend on the fossils. A lot of creationists like to say that you date the rocks by the fossils, and then you date the fossils by the rocks, and it's circular. Well, of course, it used to be like that, but now we have radiometry. And interestingly, what radiometry did was it showed us that we'd got it pretty much right when we dated it without radiometry. Anyway, going back, the thing is, what we do have in the fossil record is a chronological progression of species through the ages. And so the best explanation, this is a different form of reasoning. Observing things today is induction. Looking at something in the past and saying, well, the best explanation for that is that what goes on now went on then as well. That's not induction, that's abduction. But nevertheless, it's sound.
So my understanding is, for billions of years, you mostly just have these like little single cell things that don't do much. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then, so for 2 billion years or something.
Yeah.
Then a geologically speaking, extremely short period of time, just millions of years, you have 26 new phyla or something.
500 or so. Yeah. So I want to get away from the fossil record, because it's
wait, this is the part that I'm most interested in, is the Cambrian explosion.
Well, okay.
Because what you just said is not supported by the evidence.
No. What I'm
saying in that time period, the evidence shows stasis for billions of years, and then an explosion of not a new species, not a new genus, but new phyla, which is like one of the highest distinctions you can have. Mm-hmm. So it's not gradualism. It's not slowly changing into something new. What we observe is stasis for a long time that shouldn't be possible. Shouldn't be possible to have billions of years of stasis.
Okay.
And then a sudden explosion of life, where it's like all this
Yeah.
complex stuff came out with no precursor observed.
Okay, right. I'm going to challenge the use of the word explosion here because an explosion is normally reckoned to be something that happens in microseconds. But what happened in that Cambrian period went on for millions of years.
Right.
Okay.
Which isn't enough time to go from a single cell to complex life of almost virtually every phylum that exists. There's not enough time for that to happen.
Well, that's untrue. That's untrue.
With gradual mutation and change and things like that.
The biota of the Cambrian era, it was very different from the current extant biodiversity on planet Earth today. Hugely different. But I want to track back to, I don't know whether you're familiar with, what are they called? See, I didn't come prepared for this, did I? A few minutes ago.
Sir, John, would you like to get you some tea or something, or some coffee?
I've got some water, thank you. But a few minutes ago, I was watching snooker on the TV, and I suddenly got invited to this. Had I known that I was going to do this, I would have mugged up, refreshed my memory of some of these things. But the earliest life forms that we know of are Precambrian. Now, they're in a period that's, what's the name of it? It's the somebody look this up for me, can you? It's in the fossil beds are in Australia, and they form mounds of.
I know what you're talking. Stratolis or something lists.
Yeah.
Stromatoliths or something.
Yeah. Which were not even properly cellular, and were very much pre-Cambrian. The Cambrian era was about 500 million years ago, thereabouts. And these go back before them, and I can't think of the name of that period, I'm afraid. Catch me when I've looked up this in advance to refresh my memory. But off the top of my head, the evidence for people who are creationists love to pick holes in the fossil record because, of course, we can't be sure. We've got to make judgments about what we see. But the evidence for evolution is very strong in a number of other departments. I mean, take, for example, COVID.
Okay.
COVID, it evolves, doesn't it? We keep having to combat new mutants with new vaccines.
Okay, yeah. I think that we all agree that in that level of evolution, though.
Well, as I said, go back. What's going to stop small changes like, COVID isn't a good example of this because a virus is a quite exceptional type of organism that can't live independently.
Right.
And it doesn't undergo reproduction on its own. What it does is it hijacks another organism's cellular mechanism to do that. So it's not really in the same ballpark as conventional evolution, if you like. But I go back to the question of how is the accumulation of small changes, call them adaptations, call them microevolutions, if you like. How are they prevented from accumulating?
But where's the evidence of even small changes in the Precambrian era? We see basically the same little microbe things for billions of years in stasis.
Well, life was single cells for a long time, and then it evolved into be multicellular, right? There's not a lot of fossils of little microorganisms.
Where in the fossil record is that part?
Well,
yeah.
Can I just explain fossilization to you? Most things, when they die, either get eaten or they rot. Okay, that's our fate. Yeah, it's only the things that have resistant parts, shells, bones, that are likely to survive for any length of time. And to prevent them from being eaten or rotting, they've got to get buried. Okay, so the chances of that are quite small. And then the layers, the stratum that they're buried in has to be, the earth is moving, and the layer that they're buried in has to be accessible. So, of course, if they're at the bottom of the sea and lots of layers of different sediment has come down on top of them and crushed them and pushed them down and down, we're not going to find them. But
right.
if that land moves and it ever does outcrop, come to the surface, then erosion might wear it away and some fossils may appear. Again, we have another level of improbability. Then the next level is, will they be found? The earth has a huge amount of surface, and the chances of men stumbling on some fossils is pretty remote. So don't expect to find.
Right, but just to put this into perspective, fossils of soft things have been found in the pre-Cambrian strata, correct?
Sure.
Jellyfish, for example, are one of the more kind of complex organisms so that we have fossils of jellies.
We do.
So we do have some of those.
Yeah.
In principle, if there were some soft-bodied organisms, they could have fossilized. We do have fossils of some things that are soft.
Did I discount anything out? No, I just tried to.
But you admit that the evidence isn't there? Like the fossil record doesn't have this part recorded.
There is no imperative on the fossilization process to record anything for the benefit of future mankind.
Right, but do you agree that it's not in the fossil record?
Well, it doesn't matter, does it?
It matters to me a lot. It matters a lot because I'm trying to understand how this stuff works.
That's because you're thinking in terms of individuals.
No, I'm not necessarily thinking in terms of individuals.
You're wanting to know whether I admit, whether I agree. My opinion is trivial. What we need to look at is the evidence. And I'm not there looking at it, and neither are you. So what we need to do, if you really want that question answered, is get together, go to the source of this material.
Well, I'm looking at some of the evidence. I'm looking at photos of some of the evidence, like fossils of jellyfish, for example, and these trilobites and shit. Yeah.
But are you looking at them with the eyes of the expert in that particular specialism? Because
I'm not.
I'm not in a position to challenge people who have spent their lives doing that particular study, because that's what they do.
Well, I am in a position to use critical thinking skills and apply it to anything I come across, so I don't need an authority for a figure to tell me what to believe.
Good. Keep that up. Keep up the critical thinking. That's how science works. And we discover the most, we learn the most when we turn out to have been wrong.
Sure, yeah. So unlike Darwin, you don't think that you don't like to call it the Cambrian explosion, but that's the only thing I know it referred to as a problematic thing that's there that needs an explanation.
Darwin died 150 years ago. There was a lot he didn't know that we do now. What I'm quibbling is what you said.
But what do we know now that changes what he said about the Cambrian explosion being a major problem?
Did I say we know everything now? I don't think so. What I'm quibbling with is the use of the word explosion. It's not appropriate in paleontology.
How about Cambrian diversification event? That's a fair way to put it?
Okay.
Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I suggest that you look at some of the videos I've had, because one of my guests on the show,
was
hateful, sir. Go ahead.
No, they all enjoy it. They all like talking to me and would come back, so they tell me. But one of them.
You're always welcome to come on the show. I like you. You're good people.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure whether I want to do 11 hours with you, though.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Can I just recommend one of my videos with Dr. Benton. I can't remember David. I think David Benton. No, Michael Benton. No, I can't remember his first name. But
the Michael Benton.
No, Dr. Benton. He's at Bristol University. Is an expert in not the
Michael Benton, the dinosaur expert.
okay, yeah.
Is that him? I think I just read a book by him.
Yeah, good. Okay, that's him. Yeah, I interviewed him a few months ago.
Oh,
Take
wow.
a look at my Free Thought Hour archive, and you'll find it. So yeah, Michael Benton. That's right.
Was it on dinosaur extinction?
No, because what he has discovered is another. What shall I call it? Discontinuity. Because the dinosaurs were caused to be extinct by the asteroid strike and the subsequent change to the climate, thanks to the fact that it set off all the volcanoes and this, that, and the other. What he discovered was an earlier extinct. No, more of the opposite of an extinction, a diversification. Take a look. I can't remember the details because I talk to a lot of people.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out.
And I don't have a very good memory at my age. As I was saying, most of my memory is in my phone. So take a look at that Free Thought Hour in the archive. It may be in. I've got several playlists. It may be in one or the other.
I think I found it. So.
Oh, great. Okay, so you can link it.
Mr. Richards, may I ask you something real quick?
Sure.
Would you be open to a? It's kind of repetitive. Open to an open discussion with a fella. I'm sure you've heard his name, Kent Hovind.
Yeah, yes, I'd love to meet him. Yes.
Oh, that would be good.
Yes.
You'd be great.
Mr. Richards and Adam, if you would like to also be involved as well, I'm sure there'd be no issue. I could probably get something going within the week if that'd be something you'd be interested in, John.
Well, that would be fantastic. Fan-bloody-tastic. Can you get me Ken Ham as well?
No, I don't think I can get Ken Ham, and to be honest with you, he's kind of an embarrassment to me. So I don't give a damn for Mr. Ham. But Kent Hovind's interesting. I think you two would have an interesting discussion.
Sure.
Can you give me a couple of times this week you might be free, so I know a time and day to be able to give him?
Well, I am retired, so this is my full-time mission. Okay. Except that a couple of periods of, and don't forget I'm in the UK, so I'm time shifted from you. I don't know which side of the States you are, but you're either 5 hours or 8 hours or behind me. Okay. So just throw me a time. I'll tell you whether I'm available, because there are 2 periods in the day when I'm not available because I'm taking my kids to school and fetching them. Okay.
All right. Let me see. I think I could probably, let me take a look. When did I have the next video scheduled? I could probably have Kent on there. Because I really, Adam, would you like to participate as well? Last time you got to talk to Kent, you seem to have a pretty good discussion with him as well.
I could, but I don't see any reason not to just do John and Kent, and you moderate it, and maybe questions from the chat or something. All
right, sounds good. We like to, whenever we, I don't do it like a hardcore debate. It's just an open discussion where you guys can talk back and forth. And if people have questions out in the comments, I do this number, yay, and then you guys can answer if you want, or tell the person to screw off. It's up to you.
Okay. Well, I do anything, because if you look at my archive again, you'll see that a couple of weeks ago I did a proper formal debate with Nick Peters, the apologist.
Well, would you prefer it to be like a debate where it's timed, or an open discussion?
I'm happy with the chat.
That sounds good. Sounds good. All right. How does I'm pretty sure I could get something set up for the 26th. How's that sound at 7 p.m.? 26. It'd be 7 p.m. Central in the United States. I don't know what the time would be for you.
Oh, you're Central, are you? Okay. Let me have a look at my diary. 26th is Tuesday, and Central time. Give me a minute. Use the phone for this one, I think. Central time, I think, is 6 hours behind me. So your 7 p.m. will be past my bedtime.
Sorry. Oh, no. Goodness.
It'll be 1 a.m. here.
Let me see. I'll tell you what, I'll see how early he can actually do things. And because he's down in Alabama. I think he's got the same time zone. Okay. All right, I'll try to set it up as early as possible. I'll send you information, all that, leave some comments and all that. Unless you want to I can give you my email. You got a piece
Sure.
of paper and pen or something?
I have, yeah. Unless the
Okay.
kids have run off with the pen, they do that. Right, go.
Brett Keane, just like it's spelt right there. Phone at gmail.com. Brett Keane, phone at gmail.com. No space, no symbols.
Okay. Got that. Mine, I have several, but the one I use for my video channel is freethoughtcity.productions@gmail.com.
All right. I'm
Okay.
gonna text him while you guys are talking and everything. It's gonna probably be a little bit before he wakes up. I want to make sure it's out there and see if
Yeah.
he'd be ready to rock and roll.
That'd be great. I think Olivia, didn't you have a question earlier?
Yeah. How did sexual reproduction evolve?
Good question.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Well, of course,
Now we're talking.
yeah. The absolute truthful answer to that is we don't know, but we have a very good hypothesis. So if you look back at living species, going from the more complex ones down through towards the more simple ones, you will find that at the level of unicells, a lot of creatures are asexual. They don't meet a partner, they just split into two and they become separate individuals. Okay. But if you look at other members of that category, other unicells, you'll find that some of them are bigger than others. We've got words for this. We call it isogamy, is when two identical unicells meet and exchange something and then maybe go into a cyst, and perhaps 8 little individuals come out of that and they're the same as their parents. That's isogamy, because we have the need to mate, but no differentiation between the sexes. Okay. Then we have heterogamy, where one of the two partners is a big one and the other one is a small one, but otherwise they seem to behave identically as far as we can tell. But you need to reproduce, you need to get a big one and a small one together. Hetero means others, iso means equal. So then we go from there to oogamy, where the difference has become very significant because the big one is not motile, because most of these early creatures can swim. They have flagella or cilia, But in the case of oogamy, and there are species that still live that reproduce like this, the big one doesn't have any way of moving and the small one does. So now you've got to an egg and sperm scenario. Okay. And take it from there. That turned out to be such a good idea, because what you're getting is a cross-fertilization of genetic material, which improves the possibility of variation. And if you have huge amounts of variation in your offspring, the chances are better that some of them will be able to survive environmental changes.
So you're saying that it isn't just random mutation that led to big changes, like the explosions or events of diversification, but the development of sexual recombination is also a big reason for diversity.
Exactly. Creationists love to get hung up on what they call mutation as a big factor in evolution. It isn't really that big anymore, except in cases like viruses. But what you've put your finger on the pulse here, because what we have is recombination of existing information. That's a big factor now. Way back in the early days of the planet, there was no ozone layer because photosynthesis hadn't started. So the atmosphere wasn't oxygenated. And if you don't have oxygen, you can't have ozone because it's O3, And what the ozone layer does is it acts as a screen to keep out the shortest wavelengths of the UV part of the sun's spectrum. Okay, so that's what causes mutation. I mean, it still does today. We don't get UVC so much now, but we get UVA, and it still causes skin cancer because it's a mutating phenomenon, a mutating force, mutating energy. Okay, but back then, before the ozone layer had formed, mutation was the biggest factor in the development of, in the bringing about of change and the development of new organisms.
John, do you have a rough? Oh, sorry. Do you have a rough idea of when that would have happened? The first sexual reproduction?
Off the top of my head, I don't. No, but it was in water, so it wasn't. At that time, there were no creatures on land. So we're going back a really long time. And also, can I go back?
John, real quick, in a few hours, I should get a response. I sent him a message and all that. And he should get back to me in a few hours. I'll be able to give you the answer on it. I'm pretty sure he'd be more than happy to. He loves the discussion, and it looks like you're very passionate as well. Continue on, sir. I apologize for the interruption.
Well, where was I again? I was saying that was Olivia. Is it Olivia? Beg your pardon if I got your name wrong. What you've stumbled on there is that since sexual reproduction came about, we now have another very powerful instrument for producing change. It's recombination. And recombination, thanks to sex, not recombination within your own genome, which would be the case in asexual reproduction, producing clones pretty much identical. What we now have is two different genomes coming together, allowing all sorts of shuffling of the cards. So that's why none of your children are identical. They don't look like you. They don't look like each other. They are distinct individuals thanks to sexual reproduction, thanks to recombination, which happens at two stages. You get change when the gametes are produced, because meiosis is a rough process during which chromosomes get twisted and exchange bits and bits get lost and all sorts of things happen. So that changes the message that's going into the gamete. Then, of course, you've got this fertilization event where a whole new set of cards is introduced. And from then on, what you're looking at is a variant, not an identical copy of the ancestor. This isn't photocopying.
Quick question. If you shuffled my genes and my wife's genes as many times as you want, would you ever have a new phylum result from that?
No, it's very unlikely. But what you've got to realize is that change is not brought about. New species are not brought about by reproduction. What reproduction does is produce variation. The change is brought about by the environment. The environment kills some of the variants. They don't go on to, the dead don't breed. Okay? Forget survival of the fittest. That's a misrepresentation. It's the dead don't breed. That's a mechanism. And that's where the change happens. It's those who go through the filter. So no amount of shuffling of you and your wife's genes are likely to produce a new phylum. But they will produce a variation of human population. And then planet Earth will work on it. And those who succeed may go on after a number of generations to produce something distinct. I've done some videos on this. You can see them on my channel.
Oh, awesome. So my question was not just recombination by itself. I mean, if you had recombination in concert with the environment, you're saying it would eventually result in a new phylum.
Probably. Yes, I'm not.
How long do you think that might take?
Well, how much change is the environment going to impose?
I mean, if it's completely different planets or something, how long might it take?
Well, any completely different planet that we know of is inhospitable to life. So,
Right, but that's not my even if you have the most extreme environment change possible, in other words, how are we getting something that's as different as these different phyla if we're using just recombination and mutation and things like that?
it's impossible to predict.
Hmm.
There's too many imponderables there. But looking back, we can see a progression of chronological progression of changes that the best explanation for them is that change happened.
Right, but we see things like, even if you admit, fish becoming amphibians, becoming reptiles, and synapsids becoming cynodonts, and cynodonts becoming mammals, and things like that, those are not as diverse as the difference between a chordate and a starfish or something.
Okay.
But those first distinctions between those types of differences, the extreme differences between phyla, are one of the first things we see.
Body plans is what you're talking about here.
Yeah, the body plan is like after that really long, boring period of nothing happened, virtually nothing happened, was little dots of little microbe things. Suddenly, boom, we have all these brand new body plans.
Please not suddenly, boom. No, please not.
Suddenly. Out of nowhere with no fossil evidence.
Well, not into, as you pointed out.
No fossil record of the transition. Suddenly.
Well.
Punctuated equilibrium, just kind of stasis, and then it's pretty sudden, relatively
sudden.
We
have the least fossils for the time period farthest away, and that makes logical sense,
No, it's not farthest away, though. The
longest period of time.
The single cell stuff is the furthest away.
So what we do have is within extant species a progression of varieties that show that it works to be an organism with one cell. There are sponges, which are organisms which are colonies of cells that you can actually put through a sieve and they will become separate and can exist for a while. Or they will reassemble because
fascinating.
It's better for them to be in a sponge configuration. Sure, yeah. Then we have the earliest multicellular creatures which have two layers to their body, an outside and an inside, an ectoderm and an endoderm, and then it forms around a central cavity, and that would be there's a simple freshwater creature called a hydra, but it's like a miniature sea anemone, yeah. So, and then we can see that the next stage was when the two-layer body came up with a middle layer. So we have a mesoderm now. And at that point, there was a new tube produced rather than this enteron, which the hydra and the sea anemones have, with just one opening, so that everything goes in here and comes out of here. The next stage was what we call flatworms or planaria, which had a pipe that went all the way through. We call that a coelom, and therefore the stuff goes in at the front and comes out at the back. We can see these increasing complexities we don't have to go to the fossils. They're alive today.
Olivia said she had to go to work, but yeah, I mean, I can see as a hypothesis how you might think that's, I mean, personally, I have a hard time imagining how any of this could have happened other than something like what is taught, and maybe there wasn't a record left. It's hard to even picture how would something like that occur. But I think that at least from what I've been looking into, there are areas where you do have quite a bit missing in the record, and then just out of nowhere you have birds, for example, or bats, or these things that don't have much of anything that sort of was a sudden gradual change where they start to grow a little bit of this and it sort of develops over.
That's not true about birds. We now know that there's a clear pathway between dinosaurs and birds. Birds are little dinosaurs, and we can see how feathers originated, warm-bloodedness occurred, color appeared. We've got evidence of that now. So these
May I ask a question about that? May I ask a question? You do believe that as some kind of space rock meteorite hit the Earth, there was an extinction period?
Yes, the evidence of that is very convincing.
Whenever this extinction moment happened, how did these dinosaurs manage to do this? Since it takes so many years for the evolution process to take place, how did they manage to turn into something that would be able to survive such a cataclysmic environment?
By death. The ones that weren't adapted suitably for the new environment were killed.
Yeah, but this would have been an instant thing. Once the meteorite hits, goes to the atmosphere, bam.
We've got a BBC program that was just released. I'm not sure whether you can view it in the US yet, but we now have actual evidence of what happened on the day, listen to me, the day the asteroid hit. And there's a program, I'll see if I can link it to you, hosted by...
I've seen a documentary recently where they stated that they may have found the area in which it hit and that it actually may have impacted some of the dinosaurs itself.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So there you go.
But still, you agree that it takes millions of billions of years for major changes to take place. How would have these creatures been able to handle this? Go ahead.
Not always. Not always. There's recent evidence of evolution having occurred, speciation having occurred in quite a short period, thousands of years rather than millions. Anyway, let me find this link for you. I'm going to have to go soon because I've got children to look after. But
well, I put my email in private chat. If you want to, you can put your email. Do you know how to do private chat?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So there's mine. If you want to give me yours, I'll let you know on the Kenthoven discussion.
Great. But I'd rather have the email somewhere that I look at, which is, Freethought City Productions. And I don't look in StreamYard for emails. If you send it to me through my Gmail, I'll actually see it.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm trying to make it to where the whole public doesn't see the email. There it is. I see it. All right. So it's spelled correctly. Everything's set up right. Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, click on it and see where you go.
All right. Okay. I should have you an answer here in a couple hours and all that. You said you're taking off. You got some kids to take care of.
I do. Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's been really enjoyable having you in, and I hope that you, when you have time to come in other times we do shows, seem like a great guy.
Can I plug my stuff?
Of course, sure.
Okay, thank you. So what I do, and I've been doing this now for a couple of years, every week is Global Atheist News. Okay? So what I do is I gather, it's curation. I gather from all over the internet things that have been happening which had a religious stimulus, a religious significance, okay? Items of news that don't normally get broadcast in the mainstream news. But I gather them all together. I make a half-hour show. There's lots of video clips in it. I've got a producer who does the clever stuff, thank heavens. And that's a weekly event at your time. It goes out here at 8 p.m. on a Saturday, so it'd be 2 p.m. where you are. Then it's followed by my 1-hour interview show called Free Thought Hour, which I think you've already found in some of my playlists. So,
Oh,
and
I
then
forgot. Is there any way I could ask you one more question? May just take you a moment.
can I just finish my plugging?
Sure.
I've got one more show I want to tell you about, which is Global Atheist News Review. Unlike the report, which happens in the news, which is intended to be impersonal, unbiased, just delivery, in Global Atheist News Review, I have a panel of opinionated people who express their views on the news. And that happens today on a Sunday. And it's recorded. I don't put it out live because it's the panel's views I'm interested in, not the audience's views. So I will upload that either later today or tomorrow by my time.
All right.
Sounds
You
awesome.
have a moment? You
Go
have just okay. I was curious about something. You were talking in the beginning of the conversation about some of the trauma and of people getting out of it. I believe you said you have something called recovering theism.
Recovering from religion. And I've interviewed
Okay.
several people who are suffering from being raised in a religion. Many of them are ex-pastors, or they've been clergy themselves, and then they realized that the whole thing was a deception. I have one lady who she teared up during our conversation, and I had to steer her away to safer waters.
Well, one of the questions I was wanting to ask is, I've actually put this question out on my show before, and nobody's ever had a really good answer for this, but it appears as though atheism has the highest suicide rate in the world, as well as highest substance abuse. And I'm curious what your thoughts and opinion is on that.
Well, for a start, I don't accept that there is such a thing as atheism, because the ism ending implies that it's an ideology, and that therefore it has principles and values that everybody must subscribe to. That's not true. People who don't believe in a God simply have not been convinced by all the assorted Christians, Muslims, Mormons, Jews, Hindus, you name it, out there.
Right,
with
it's
their
the lack
stories.
of belief in deity, sure.
Exactly. And that, of course, is a very big category. And I don't know how this survey was done, which linked atheism to suicide. Is absolute nonsense.
Well,
How
not
can
just
you?
suicide, the substance abuse rate is through skyrocketing. It's
Well,
practically
okay.
through the
Now,
roof.
if you want to produce spurious statistics, what about this one? 98% of the occupants of American jails are Christian.
Right, that's true. A lot of
Yes,
atheists get
yes.
converted while they're in prison.
Well, that too, but nevertheless, there is. I know that correlation is not causation, but nevertheless, correlation is correlation.
A perfect example of what you're talking about there, which is a great topic, by the way, is Jeffrey Dahmer. As you remember, he was a cannibal, a serial killer,
Yeah.
did a lot of horrible things, but right before he died, he ended up converting over to Christianity right at the end. But he was an atheist while he was in prison.
Well, come on, he was a nutcase while he was in prison, and before then too. Yes.
Sure. But couldn't I say the same thing about religious people that end up in prison? They're just nuts. That's how they ended up there.
Well, listen, Brett, how many people do you think commit activities in order to please no God? Huh?
Well, so I suppose people would do the same reason why religious people, because they're greedy and they do it for themselves. Humans are like that.
Which is nothing to do with belief in a deity. That's just human greed, human selfishness. That's just, one of the examples of the range of human personalities that comes about as a result of evolution.
So you believe the reason why people are greedy and terrible like this because of evolution?
Well, what I believe, and again, my belief isn't important here. I think belief is just a choice. But what I think is the case is that each generation produces a variation of offspring. The variation occurs in all characteristics: height, weight, hair color, eye color, you name it, personality too. And there will always be a small percent of psychotics and sociomaniacs. That's the input of evolution. An extreme, I'll do the normal curve again. Up here on the weird end, there will be variants that are antisocial.
I agree with that. Atheist Sam Harris said that there could be up to between 3 and 5 million psychopaths and sociopaths in the world. I agree with you. Again, I've enjoyed your company, and I hope you continue to return and have good discussions with us.
Great. Thank you.
John, thanks for your time. It was really nice talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Cheers.
Have a good day.